He won. That was the only thought in his head. Marcus Thorne, a man who saw the world as a game of winners and losers, had just secured his title. He'd walked out of that courtroom with everything: the house, the portfolio, the victory. He left his ex-wife Elena with nothing but her maiden name and a check he considered a charitable donation. As he adjusted his $5,000 tie, a smug smirk played on his lips. He was free. He was rich. He was a winner. But the funny thing about winning is that you have to make sure you're playing the right game. The sterile, fluorescent light of the Los Angeles County Courthouse hallway was unkind. It highlighted the weariness etched around Elena Hayes's eyes and the faint tremor in her hands as she clutched a worn leather briefcase. Across from her, a scene of quiet triumph was unfolding. Marcus Thorne, her husband of 12 years, now officially ex-husband, was laughing. It was a low, confident chuckle shared with his lawyer, a man aptly named Roger Harding, whose face looked like it had been carved from polished, unforgiving granite. "A clean break, Marcus," Harding was saying, clapping his client on the shoulder. "Cleaner than most." "It's what we paid for, isn't it, Roger?" Marcus replied. His voice, that smooth baritone that had once charmed venture capitalists and silenced boardrooms, was slick with satisfaction. He was a man built by high-end tailors and his own ruthless ambition. Today, he wore a custom Zegna suit dark as a shark's eye. He looked like he was closing a billion-dollar deal, not ending a marriage. To him, perhaps they were the same. The judge had hammered the gavel down just 10 minutes prior. The ruling was brutal. The prenuptial agreement signed by a 25-year-old Elena who was dizzy in love and blind to the fine print was upheld. Ironclad, Harding had called it. Marcus retained 100% of his company, Thorne Capital. He retained the Pacific Palisades mansion, the one Elena had spent 3 years designing with architect Ken Lin. He retained the art collection, her art collection, the one she had painstakingly curated, which he had always called her little hobby. Elena Hayes, formerly Thorne, walked away with a one-time lump sum payout. It was a staggering amount to an average person, but compared to the empire she had helped build, it was an insult. It was, as Marcus had so crudely put it during depositions, severance. Elena's lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, a sharp-eyed woman who seemed to be vibrating with a suppressed fury, placed a hand on her arm. "Elena, it's over. Let's go." "Just a moment," Elena whispered. Her voice was hoarse. Marcus saw them. The show wasn't over. He straightened his silk tie, the smirk finding its full, arrogant bloom. He strode over his Italian leather shoes, clicking an expensive, lonely rhythm on the polished floor. He stopped a foot in front of her. He was taller, broader, a physical eclipse. "Elena," he said, his tone dripping with a grotesque faux pity, "I want you to know this was business, nothing personal." Elena's gaze lifted. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were dry. She had run out of tears weeks ago. "Was it business, Marcus? Or was it a game?" He chuckled, that same self-satisfied sound. "In my world, sweetheart, they're the same thing, and you always have to play to win." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a slim silver card holder. He extracted a business card. Marcus Thorne, CEO and founder, Thorne Capital. "If you know," he gestured vaguely. "If you ever find yourself in a real jam, my new assistant Candy can probably find a spot for you. Reception, maybe." It was the final twisting of the knife. The implication that she, a woman with a dual master's in art history and business from Yale, was fit only for answering his phones. Elena didn't take the card. She just looked at his hand until he almost awkwardly let it drop to his side. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. "Good luck, Elena," he said, the smirk returning wider than ever. He turned to leave. "Try not to, well, just good luck." He patted her shoulder as he passed. A gesture of ownership, of dismissal. Elena didn't flinch. She just watched him walk away. She watched as he and Harding got into the elevator, his laughter echoing in the sterile hall. She watched the polished steel doors slide shut sealing her past away. "He thinks he won." Sarah, her lawyer, said, her voice tight. "Yes." Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady, though it felt like it was coming from a great distance. "He does." She took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was filtered through razor blades. She turned to Sarah, a flicker of something new, something cold and hard igniting in her eyes. "Is it done?" Elena asked. Sarah Jenkins checked her phone. A single new text message. She smiled. It was not a nice smile. "The asset freeze is complete," Sarah said. "The SEC just filed the motion. Project Lyra is officially grounded." Elena nodded, a single sharp movement. "Good. Let's go." As they walked towards the exit, Elena finally allowed herself a small secret smile. Marcus was right. It was a game. He had just been playing the wrong one. The marriage hadn't started with a prenup. It had started with a painting. Elena Hayes was 24, the youngest ever guest curator at the Getty, giving a lecture on the provenance of Dutch masters. He was Marcus Thorne, 30, a junior partner at a small venture capital firm, and he was bored. He'd been dragged there by a potential investor, Arthur Pennington, an old money fossil who cared more for art than algorithms. Marcus was about to fake a phone call when he heard her speak. It wasn't just her voice, though. It was lovely, clear, and confident. It was the way she spoke. She wasn't just describing the art. She was telling its story. She wove a narrative of secret patrons, stolen canvases, and the chemical composition of a specific long-lost blue pigment. That night, Arthur Pennington, utterly charmed, pledged $5 million to Marcus's new fund. Marcus didn't see the art. He saw the tool. He pursued her with the same single-minded focus he applied to a hostile takeover. Elena, a romantic intellectual, was swept away. He was charismatic, brilliant, and he seemed to see her. He praised her mind, not just her beauty. He told her she was his secret weapon. "You, Lena," he'd murmur, kissing her temple after a successful dinner party. "You speak their language. I just speak money. You speak legacy." She fell for it. She married him. She signed the prenup without a lawyer of her own. "It's just a formality, baby," he'd said, brushing her hair from her face. "A just in case. The partners insist." The first 5 years were a blur of ambition. Elena put her PhD on hold. Then she put her career on hold. Her new job, as Marcus called it, was him. She was the perfect hostess. She knew which wine to serve the Vandermeer family, what topic to avoid with the Japanese tech mogul, and exactly which obscure 18th century sculpture to place in the sightline of a difficult investor. She built their social world. She cultivated the connections. She turned Marcus Thorne, a smart but rough-edged hustler, into Mr. Marcus Thorne, a polished, formidable player. The house in the Palisades was her project. He gave her an unlimited budget, his first grand gesture of trust. She poured her soul into it, creating a space that was both a home and a masterpiece of modern design. It became the place to be. A party at the Thorne residence was a guaranteed entry into the social pages. And Marcus's star rose. Thorne Capital became a powerhouse. The first crack appeared not with a bang, but with a password. Elena was handling their shared calendar, another of her wifely duties, when she saw an entry, Project Lyra, final. It was on a Saturday. She was supposed to be in New York for a gallery opening. He'd told her he had a board retreat. Curious, she tried to open the attached file. It was password protected. She tried the usual, their anniversary, his birthday, password 1223. Nothing. On a whim, she typed in the name of his first ever successful stock flip, a name he'd told her in their early wine-soaked nights of sharing secrets. Icarus. The file opened. It wasn't a board retreat. It was a network of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and wire transfers. It was vast. And at the center of it was Project Lyra, a deal she recognized. It was a deal she had helped him land. It was the deal with the Vandermeer family, a green tech initiative she had personally pitched to the matriarch Beatrix Vandermeer over tea, and a discussion of 17th century tulip cultivation. Marcus had told her the deal fell through. A total loss, he'd lamented before taking her to Cabo to get over the disappointment. But here it was. Not a loss, but a massive secret success. He had not only closed the deal, but he had structured it to bypass Thorn Capital's main accounts and therefore their marital assets. He had hidden $80 million. She scrolled deeper, her blood turning to ice. She saw transfers to other accounts. One in particular had a recurring payment. A condo in Miami. A car lease. The name on the transfer authorization was C. Alvarez. Candy. Elena closed the laptop. The click of the lid was deafening in the silent glass-walled office that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. The house she had built suddenly felt like a mausoleum. She wasn't his partner. She wasn't his secret weapon. She was just his first investor, the one he was planning to cut loose. For 6 months, she played the part. She was the perfect, oblivious wife. She smiled at the parties. She approved flower arrangements. She ignored the late-night meetings and the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Inside, she was a different person. She was a forensic investigator. Every night after he fell asleep, a deep, dreamless slumber of the self-assured, she would go to her office. She memorized account numbers. She photographed documents with a burner phone. She traced the labyrinth of his deceit from the Cayman Islands to Delaware to a small, unassuming bank in Zurich. She learned his real business, the fraud, the tax evasion, the way he was systematically draining the company to build a new life, one that didn't include her. She knew that if she confronted him, he would destroy her. He would use the ironclad prenup, his army of lawyers, and her emotional instability to leave her with nothing. So she didn't confront him. She prepared. She needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. She couldn't walk into a top-tier LA firm. Marcus had half of them on retainer. She needed someone he would never see coming. She started looking for her own secret weapon. And in her research, scrolling through obscure legal journals, she found a name. A fixer, known in elite circles, a ghost who specialized in impossible divorces. The problem was this lawyer was unreachable. Unless Elena remembered a name from her past, a reclusive, eccentric collector she had briefly corresponded with years ago about a rare painting. He was known for his unusual connections. He was also known to despise men like Marcus Thorn. She dug out the old monogrammed stationery. She picked up her favorite fountain pen. It was a long shot, a desperate wild pass. She wrote a letter, not asking for help, but offering a story. A story about a JMW Turner painting a fraudulent financier and a wife who had finally learned to see the true pigment. She sent the letter via private courier to an unlisted address in Switzerland. 2 weeks later, a new encrypted phone appeared on her doorstep. No note, no card. She turned it on. There was one number in the contacts saved under a single ominous letter B. She pressed call. A voice answered. It was quiet, cultured, and carried the weight of old-world power. "Mrs. Thorne," the voice said without preamble. "Or perhaps I should say, Ms. Hayes. I received your letter. I must say your analysis of the slave ship was insightful. Tell me more about the man who thinks he can paint over a masterpiece." His name was Julian Alistair Blackwood, and he was about to change the game. Marcus Thorne was in a magnificent mood. He left the courthouse, tossed his briefcase onto the passenger seat of his Aston Martin DB11, and peeled out of the parking garage. The judge's words echoed in his head. The court finds in favor of Mr. Thorne. He won. He'd kept his house. He'd kept his money. He'd swatted Elena away like a fly. He blasted Frank Sinatra. I did it. My way. He hit the speed dial for Candy. "Hey, baby," he crooned, merging onto the Pacific Coast Highway. "Guess who's officially a free man?" "Ooh, really, baby?" Candy's voice was breathy and high. "Does that mean we can finally go public? I've been dying to post that pic from Cabo." "Post away, sweetheart," Marcus laughed. And book a table at Spago, the best one. We're celebrating. I just closed the deal of a lifetime." He hung up, feeling the sun on his face. He was invincible. Instead of heading straight home to the Palisades, he took a detour. He drove toward the Marina del Rey. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he just wanted to look at the water. Maybe subconsciously he wanted to drive by the small slip where his boat, a modest 40-foot Sea Ray, was docked, the boat Elena had always called his toy. He passed the main channel where the serious boats were, and then he saw it. It wasn't a boat. It was a floating fortress. It was a 350-foot super yacht, a sleek, menacing blade of obsidian and chrome. It was parked in the private deep-water dock usually reserved for visiting royalty or tech demigods. It was the Astria. Marcus knew the Astria. Everyone in his world knew it. It was a ghost ship, a legend. It belonged to the most reclusive and terrifying man in global finance, Julian Alistair Blackwood. Blackwood wasn't just rich. Rich was what Marcus was. Blackwood was powerful. He didn't just own companies, he owned industries. Shipping rare earth minerals, AI development. He was old money aristocracy mixed with new money ruthlessness. He was rumored to move markets with a single encrypted email. He was, in a word, a god. An unseen, vengeful god. Marcus slowed the Aston Martin, his Sinatra forgotten. He stared, impressed and slightly jealous. What was Blackwood doing in L.A.? He was about to drive on when he saw movement on the aft deck. A gangway impossibly sleek had been extended to the private dock. A woman was stepping off. She was wearing a simple white linen sundress. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a loose, artless ponytail. She was barefoot. She looked young, lighter. She turned and laughed, a sound that carried across the water, clear as a bell. It was a laugh Marcus hadn't heard in a decade. His foot slammed on the brake. The Aston Martin fishtailed slightly. It was Elena, but it wasn't his Elena. Not the worn-out, defeated woman in the drab gray suit he had just decimated in court. This Elena was radiant. She was glowing. She stepped onto the dock. A man's hand reached out to steady her. Not a crew member in a uniform. A man in a dark, custom-made polo shirt and white trousers. The man stepped out from the yacht's shadow into the full golden glare of the California sun. Marcus went cold. His blood felt like it had been replaced with ice water. It was Julian Alistair Blackwood. He wasn't what Marcus had expected. He wasn't old. He was perhaps 50, with sharp aristocratic features, silvering hair at the temples, and the most arresting, intelligent eyes Marcus had ever seen. He wasn't smiling, but his gaze on Elena was intimate, possessive. He said something, and Elena laughed again, leaning her head against his shoulder for a brief, familiar moment. Blackwood then looked up directly at the road. Directly at the flashy, conspicuous Aston Martin stopped dead in the middle of it. He didn't know Marcus. He couldn't. But his eyes, cold gray and utterly devoid of emotion, seemed to scan him, assess him, and dismiss him in a single chilling instant. Then Julian Alistair Blackwood did something that stopped Marcus's heart. He smiled. It was a small, thin, cold smile, and it was aimed right at Marcus. It was the smile of a predator that has just spotted its prey. Elena turned, following his gaze. She saw the Aston Martin. She saw Marcus, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror silhouetted behind the glass. Her laugh died. Her expression didn't change. She didn't look sad. She didn't look angry. She didn't look anything. She simply held his gaze. Then, in a gesture of ultimate devastating dismissal, she turned her back on him. She took Blackwood's offered arm, and together they walked up the dock toward a waiting, unmarked black Bentley. Marcus sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The silence in the car was absolute. The Sinatra song had ended. His phone buzzed. A text from Candy. Spago at 8:03. 3. 3. Marcus didn't see it. All he could see was Elena, his mousy, defeated, cast-off wife, walking away with a man who could buy and sell Marcus Thorne before breakfast. The smirk he'd worn out of the courthouse felt like a grotesque painted-on grimace. It was gone. In its place was a new, unfamiliar sensation. It was fear. "What?" he whispered to the empty car. "What the hell is going on?" The Palisades mansion had never felt so cold. Marcus stood in the center of the vast, minimalist living room the one Architectural Digest had featured. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooked a black, glittering expanse of the Pacific. The house he had won. He had a glass of 30-year-old Macallan in his hand. It tasted like ash. He was replaying the scene at the marina over and over. Elena, Blackwood, the Astria, the smile. His first thought, she was sleeping with him. It was the only way it made sense. His plain, bookish Elena had somehow impossibly landed the biggest whale on the planet. He felt a flash of, not jealousy, but offense. She was his. How dare she? But that didn't add up. The Julian Blackwood he'd heard about didn't do scandals. He didn't dally with newly divorced wives of second-rate financiers. He grabbed his phone and called Roger Harding, his lawyer. "Marcus, you should be celebrating." Harding's voice boomed. "Shut up and listen," Marcus snapped. "Who is Elena's lawyer, the new one? Sarah Jenkins." "Jenkins, I told you she's a junior league shark. Out of her depth. Why?" "She's not. I'm running her name. She's a ghost. No online presence, no firm website. Where did she come from?" "Marcus, you won. It doesn't matter." "It matters," Marcus roared. "And one more thing. I want you to find out what Julian Alistair Blackwood is doing in Los Angeles." There was a dead silence on the line. "Blackwood." Harding's voice was suddenly 2 octaves higher. "The Astria Blackwood." "Yes, that Blackwood. He's here. And I think he's with Elena." The silence that followed was so profound Marcus thought the call had dropped. "Roger." "Marcus." Harding said, his voice now a strained, sober whisper. "You need to be very, very careful. Do not call me again on this line. Do not call him. Do not do anything." The call clicked off. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Marcus's chest. He poured another whiskey. He did what he always did when he was in trouble. He called his private investigator, a former Mossad agent named Ari, who specialized in corporate espionage. "Ari, I need you on Julian Blackwood and my ex-wife, Elena Hayes." "Blackwood?" Ari's voice was flat. "That will be expensive." "I don't care what it costs," Marcus snarled. "I want to know where they met, what they're doing, and where she's sleeping. I want it by morning." Marcus didn't sleep. He paced the cold marble floors of his house, the whiskey doing nothing to dull the sharp edges of his anxiety. At 4:17 a.m. his encrypted phone buzzed. A file from Ari. It wasn't a long report. It was a single paragraph and 3 attachments. Subject: Hayes Elena. Re Blackwood J.A. No confirmed romantic link. Subject has been residing for 94 days at the Continuum, a private, unlisted penthouse property in Century City. Property is owned by Alistair Holdings, a Blackwood shell corp. Subject's legal counsel, Sarah A. Jenkins, is not a divorce attorney. She is the lead counsel for Blackwood's North American Acquisitions and Risk Division. Her personal firm, Jenkins & Associates, is a known Blackwood subsidiary specializing in forensic accounting and reputational cleansing. Attachments: 1. SEC Flag Request 774 B PDF. 2. IRS Subpoena International Wire Transfer 8938. PDF 3. File La Thorne Capital Project Lyra. Whistleblower. Zip. Marcus's hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the phone. 94 days. Elena had been in a Blackwood-owned property for 3 months, before she even filed for divorce. Sarah Jenkins, Forensic Accounting. He clicked on the third attachment. Whistleblower. Zip. He entered his password. The file opened. It was his file. The one from his laptop. The Icarus file. It was every offshore account. Every illegal transfer. Every lie. It was a complete itemized and perfectly documented record of his fraud. He stared, his vision tunneling. The court case. The argument over the house. The insulting payout. It was all a distraction. It was a show. A puppet show designed to keep him busy, to make him look at the marital assets while she wasn't trying to win the divorce. She was trying to lose it. She had to prove she had no financial stake, no motive, to establish herself as a disgruntled party, not a co-conspirator. He thought back to the courtroom. Elena's defeated slump. Her lawyer's fury. It was theater. It was all a goddamn performance. He had walked into that courtroom thinking he was the lion. He was the lamb. He was being led to the slaughter. She, he stammered, sinking into a $50,000 Eames chair. She gave him the house. She let him win the art. She let him keep his company, because she knew. She knew that the house was about to be seized as an asset bought with laundered money. She knew the art collection would be impounded. And she knew that Thorne Capital, his entire empire, was a house of cards that she had just handed gift-wrapped to the IRS and the SEC. The phone rang. It was his main office line diverting to his cell. It was 4:30 a.m. "Hello," he whispered. "Mr. Thorne?" The voice was brisk, official. "This is Agent Davies from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Los Angeles Field Office. We are calling to inform you that a freeze has been placed on all assets related to Thorne Capital and its subsidiaries pending a federal investigation into... Well, the list is quite long. We'd like you to be at our office at 8 a.m. sharp. And, sir, you should probably bring a lawyer, a criminal lawyer." Marcus Thorne let the phone slip from his numb fingers. It clattered onto the marble floor, the agent's voice still tinny and distant. He looked out the window. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in sickening shades of pink and orange. He hadn't been swindled. He hadn't been outplayed. He had been hunted. And the smirk he saw at the Marina Blackwood's cold, thin smile wasn't a hello. It was a checkmate. The bottom had fallen out 6 months ago. After Elena discovered the Icarus file, she spent a week in a fog of pure, undiluted despair. She was trapped. She was a bird in a gilded cage, and the door had just been welded shut. If she left him, the prenup would leave her destitute. If she stayed, she was a silent partner to a criminal. If she exposed him, he would drag her down with him. He'd claim she was complicit, that her hobby of curating their art collection was in fact money laundering. He was smart enough to have implicated her even passively. She was trapped. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She disappeared into the art. There was a small private gallery in Culver City that was showing a piece on loan, JMW Turner's Slave Ship Slavers Throwing Overboard the Dead and Dying. Elena had written her graduate thesis on it. She stood before the chaotic, violent, and terrifyingly beautiful canvas for almost an hour. It was a painting about a horrific, inhuman crime, the captain of a slave ship throwing the sick and dying overboard to collect insurance money. A crime of profit. It was a masterpiece of hidden brutality. The sublime, fiery sunset almost completely masked the drowning hands and monstrous fish in the foreground. It was, she thought, a perfect portrait of her husband. He saw the beauty, but also the balance sheet, a quiet voice said beside her. Elena started. She hadn't realized anyone else was there. The man was standing just behind her shoulder. He was impeccably dressed, but his clothes were understated. He had the kind of face that wasn't handsome but compelling. His eyes, a pale, watchful gray, were fixed on the canvas. "The insurance claim," Elena whispered, her voice rusty. "The Zong massacre. He painted the invoice. The man turned his head and his gaze was electric. Very few people see that. They see a sunset. You see the fraud. It's hard to miss, Elena said, if you know what you're looking for. He looked at her, really looked at her with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in years. I am Julian Blackwood, he said, offering a hand. I own the gallery and this painting. Elena Hayes, she said, deliberately dropping the thorn. They didn't speak again for 10 minutes. They just looked at the painting. You're the woman who wrote the letter on Dutch pigment, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I am, she said. And you are the wife of Marcus Thorne, the man who leveraged his wife's connection to the Vandermeer family and then hid the profits in a shell company named Project Lyra. Elena's heart stopped. She turned to face him, her body rigid with shock and fear. How do you... Beatrix Vandermeer is my godmother, Blackwood said simply, his eyes never leaving the painting. She was displeased to learn her green tech investment was being used to fund a condo in Miami. She asked me to look into it, and my investigation led me to Mr. Thorne. And to you. He turned to her. The letter you wrote me, it wasn't about pigment, was it, Ms. Hayes? It was a flare. You were testing the waters, seeing if I was an ally. Elena was silent. You are in a very dangerous position, Blackwood said. Your husband is not just an adulterer. He is a high-level fraudster, and he has made you a party to it. The art you've been collecting, he's been buying it with laundered funds, using your expertise as a cover. When he falls, he will make sure he lands on you. Elena's legs gave out. She reached for a nearby bench, sinking onto it. What can I do? Right now, nothing, he said. If you divorce him, he'll crush you. He'll use the prenup and you'll have nothing to fight him with. If you report him, he'll claim you were his partner and you'll go to prison with him. He has built a perfect trap. So that's it, she said, the despair she'd been holding back finally cracking her voice. I'm done. Blackwood sat beside her. He was still a creature of immense contained energy. There is, he said, a third option. He looked at her. You let him destroy you. I don't understand. You file for divorce. You hire an average lawyer. You fight him on the marital assets, the house, the art, the bank accounts. You make him believe he is in a fight for his money. This will occupy his lawyers. It will occupy him. He is arrogant. He will be so focused on winning the divorce he won't see what's happening to his business. What is happening to his business? While he is in court fighting you over a sofa, Blackwood said, my team will be conducting a full forensic audit. We will take the information you've gathered, your Icarus file, and we will build a case, a criminal case. We will deliver it anonymously to the SEC and the IRS. Elena stared at him. You want me to lose. I want you to play the long game. Let him win the house. Let him keep his company. Let him smirk his way out of that courthouse. Because the moment the gavel falls, the real case begins. By the time he walks out victorious, his assets will be frozen, his boat will be seized, and his house will be a crime scene. He paused. This will be difficult. You will have to be the wronged wife. You will be publicly humiliated. He will paint you as a gold digger, then as a failure. You will have to take it. You will have to lose. Elena looked back at the Turner, the drowning hands hidden in the beautiful, chaotic waves. And you, she asked, why are you doing this? For your godmother. Blackwood's face hardened just slightly. Let's just say, I have a deep, abiding distaste for men who build empires on the backs of others, and I have an even deeper respect for masterpieces that have been undervalued. He stood up. I will provide you with a lawyer. Her name is Sarah Jenkins. She will be your underdog counsel. I will also provide you with a safe, secure place to live while this is happening. You will leave his house tonight. And when it's over, Blackwood said, his win will be worthless, and you will be free. He handed her a simple black business card. It had only a phone number. Ms. Jenkins is waiting. The choice, Ms. Hayes, is yours. Elena looked at the card. She looked at the painting. She thought of Marcus's smirk. She stood up. He can't just paint over the crime. He can't. No, Blackwood agreed. He can't. Where do I start? Elena asked. A small, satisfied smile touched Blackwood's lips. You already have. The next 3 months were the hardest of Elena's life, but they were also the most focused. She lived in the Continuum penthouse, a place that existed outside the normal geography of Los Angeles. It was a sterile, silent apartment in the sky, all glass and shadow, with a view that stretched from the San Gabriel Mountains to the pale, indifferent Pacific. It was a fortress provided by Blackwood, and its security was absolute. But it was also a prison. Elena spent her days in a state of suspended animation. She ate, she slept, she read, but she was not living. She was tempering. The woman who had left the courthouse shattered and betrayed was being burned away. In her place, a new woman was being forged, one made of cold tungsten resolve. Her only visitor was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was not a junior league shark. That was a carefully constructed fiction, a digital ghost. The real Sarah Jenkins was Julian Blackwood's most lethal legal weapon. She was a woman who saw the law not as a set of rules, but as a weapon system. Their meetings were not therapy sessions. They were strategy meetings. The war room. The Icarus file is good, Sarah said on their first day, her pen tapping a rhythm on a legal pad. They were in the penthouse's vast empty living room. It's a confession, but it's an unsigned confession. It's his private ledger, his fantasy. To make this stick, we need to tie it irrefutably to the corporate server. We need to prove the work was criminal, not just the fantasy. The air-gapped server, Elena said, her voice flat. She had learned of it by accident, a passing comment Marcus had made about true security. Exactly, Sarah said, her eyes sharp. He's smart. He keeps his personal fraud Icarus on his laptop. He keeps his corporate fraud Lyra on his office desktop, which is air-gapped from the main network. We need to bridge that gap. We need the server logs, the real ones. Elena's blood chilled. How? He's the only one with access. It's behind a biometric scanner, and his office is... It's his domain. You're still his wife, Sarah said, as if she were pointing out the sky was blue. For now, you still have a right to your personal property. You're going to go collect your things. He'll never let me in the office, Elena breathed. He'll be there. He'll want to watch me. I know, Sarah said. You will play the part you have been rehearsing your entire marriage, the dutiful, emotional, and slightly dim wife. He is arrogant. He wants to see you cry. He'll be so focused on his own sadistic enjoyment that he won't be looking at your hands. Sarah placed a small matte black object on the table. It looked like a standard USB drive. This is not a normal USB. It's a high-speed data siphon custom-built by Mr. Blackwood's tech division. It doesn't copy, it clones. You'll plug it into the back of his desktop tower. You will have max 30 seconds. A red light will blink while it's cloning. When the light turns green, you pull it out. But you must get him away from that desk. I don't think I can, Elena whispered, the old fear returning. Sarah's gaze hardened. Yes, you can. Because this isn't just about his money, Elena. This is about your life. He implicated you. The only way out is to be the person who burns the whole thing down. You are not a victim here. You are the whistleblower. That is the narrative we are creating. It's the only one that keeps you out of a matching orange jumpsuit. So Elena did it. She arranged the call, her voice trembling, which wasn't hard to fake. She was collecting her personal effects. Marcus was there, as Sarah predicted. He was standing in his office by the glass wall, a whiskey in his hand. The afternoon sun hit his Zegna suit. He looked like a king and he knew it. Taking he gestured with a sneer at the empty cardboard boxes she'd brought. The books make sense. Not much else you're qualified for. Better brush up on that resume. I hear reception is a tough field to break into. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. Breathe. Play the part. You are weak. You are broken. She moved to the bookshelf, pulling out her art history volumes. Her hands were shaking. Don't even think about touching the art. He warned, his voice a low growl. The prenup's clear. All my assets. Your little hobby ends today. This was it. She needed a distraction. She let a single calculated tear roll down her cheek. Marcus, she said, her voice a perfect broken whisper. The painting. The small one. The one from our honeymoon in Venice. He frowned. Which one, the gaudy one? The watercolor, she choked out. From the balcony at the Gritty Palace. It's the only thing I want. Please. He stared at her, his face contorted not with pity but with a smug, profound satisfaction. She was begging. For a memory. It was perfect. He had won everything. Fine. He sighed, rolling his eyes with exaggerated annoyance. God, you're pathetic. It's in the safe. He turned his back to her. He walked to the large steel safe hidden behind a minimalist panel. Elena's heart was a hammer in her chest. Now. She heard the quiet beep of the keypad. She moved. Her purse containing the data siphon was on his desk. In 3 seconds, 3 heart-pounding, adrenaline-fueled seconds, she was behind the desk. Her hand fumbled for the USB port on the back of the desktop tower. Click. It was in. A small red light blinked. Once. Twice. Heh. Can't even remember the combo. Marcus muttered, his back still to her. Ah. 10/22/08. Their anniversary. The cruelty was almost poetic. Elena's eyes were locked on the blinking red light. Turn. Turn green. Please God, turn green. Thunk. The heavy thunk of the safe door opening. Blink. Red. Marcus huffed, rummaging inside. Blink. Red. Blink. Green. Here, he said, turning around. Elena's hand, moving faster than thought, yanked the drive. She shoved it deep into her purse just as she fumbled for a tissue, her body collapsing in a sob. Marcus didn't notice. He tossed the small framed watercolor onto a box of books. The glass cracked. Happy, he snarled. Thank you, she choked out. It was the truest thing she had said to him in years. She grabbed her boxes and fled. She didn't stop shaking until she was back in the penthouse, the data siphon clutched in her hand like a hot coal. She gave the drive to Sarah, who plugged it into a secure, encrypted laptop. A moment of silence as the files loaded. Sarah didn't smile, but her eyes, when she looked up, were alight. It's all here, she said. The Rosetta Stone. The final bridge. He's done. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait. For the next 2 months they played divorce. It was a magnificent circus. Sarah Jenkins, on Blackwood's orders, was a brilliant B-movie lawyer. She filed frivolous motions. She objected poorly. She let Roger Harding, Marcus's attorney, run circles around her. She filed a motion demanding the return of Elena's emotional support cat, a cat that had been dead for 15 years. Harding spent an entire week and an estimated $50,000 of Marcus's money to produce a death certificate. I want the house, Sarah would demand in depositions. It's outside the prenup, Harding would roar. My client decorated it sweat equity. Marcus was lapping it up. He was winning so hard. Grind her into dust, he'd told Harding over a celebratory steak dinner. During this time, Elena met with Blackwood only once. It was not on the yacht. That was too risky. It was in a private wing of the LACMA in front of a Francis Bacon. A screaming pope trapped in a glass box. "He's enjoying it," Elena said, her voice flat. "He loves watching me beg." "Of course," Blackwood said, his eyes on the painting. "Men like Marcus don't just want to win. They want their opponent to know they've lost. It's a weakness." He gestured to the painting. "He thinks he's in a soundproof box, but the whole world is watching. Arrogance is a fatal flaw, Elena. It makes you loud when you should be silent. It makes you think a bar fight is a war. He doesn't realize he's already in his cage." His words were not comforting. Not. They were cold. He was not her savior. He was her mentor in a new cold world. The performance is almost over. The day of the final court date arrived. Elena stood in the penthouse looking at her costume, the drab gray suit, the sensible low-heeled shoes. Sarah Jenkins was by the door holding a briefcase. "You're ready." Elena looked at her reflection. A mousy, defeated, broken woman looked back. "He's going to smirk," Elena said. "I know. He's going to pat my shoulder or something." "He will," Sarah said, "and you will let him. You will be the perfect broken bird. You will look at the floor. You will let him have his victory, because you and I know what he doesn't." Sarah checked her watch. It was 8:00 a.m. The court hearing was at 9:00 a.m. "As of right now," Sarah said, "our real case, the whistleblower report authenticated by the Icarus Lyra data you secured, was electronically filed with the SEC and the IRS. The warrants are drafted. The agents are briefed. The moment that gavel hits, the real judge's order goes live." Elena took a deep breath. The air in the penthouse felt different. She was no longer a victim. She was no longer an actress. She was a soldier walking into the final battle. "Let's go lose a battle," Elena said. The morning after his victory, Marcus woke to a sound that was not part of his manicured, soundproofed world. It was a sharp, insistent official rapping at his front door. It cut through the thick whiskey and champagne fog in his head. It was 8:01 a.m. "Ugh, baby, make it stop," Candy's voice mumbled from beneath his $10,000 fret sheets. Marcus stumbled out of bed, grabbing a silk robe. He was annoyed, not alarmed. He was the king. Who would dare? He ripped open the massive custom-built door, ready to yell at a gardener or a delivery man. He froze. 6 men and 2 women, all in dark blue windbreakers with SEC and IRS emblazoned in stark yellow letters, were standing on his doorstep. Their faces were uniformly bored, unimpressed, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Marcus Thorne," the lead agent, a man named Davies, said. His voice was flat. "Who's asking?" Marcus grumbled, his mind still sluggish. Agent Davies didn't smile. He produced a warrant, holding it up like a crucifix to a vampire. "Mr. Thorne, you are the subject of a federal investigation into securities fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. We have a warrant to seize this property and all assets within as proceeds of a criminal enterprise." The words didn't compute. "Seize you can't. This is a mistake. My ex-wife, she's just bitter. She's lying." "We're not here about your divorce, sir," Davies said, pushing past him. The entire team flowed into the house like water through a breach. "We're here about Project Lyra." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. "We're here about the Vandermeer accounts," another agent already in the living room called out. "We're here about account 739B in the Cayman Islands." Davies continued, his eyes scanning the foyer. Marcus's knees buckled. Account 739B. No one knew that name. Not Harding. Not his partners. Not even Candy. Only Elena. A high-pitched shriek came from the bedroom. Candy, confronted by a stern-faced female IRS agent, was scrambling for a bathrobe. Her fake, shocked, real terror face a grotesque mask. "You can't do this. I won this house," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with a sudden sharp panic. "It's mine. The court. The judge said, you won an asset purchased with laundered funds, Mr. Thorne." Agent Davies said, not even looking at him. He was pointing at the large abstract painting in the hall, one of Elena's favorites. "Tag the suitor. We're taking that too." "That's mine." "It's evidence, sir. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal effects. Your wallet, your keys, your phone. That's it." Davies paused, then delivered the final casual execution. "And sir, you'll want to leave the Aston Martin. We're taking that too." He was escorted out. In his silk robe and slippers, he was forced to stand in his own driveway, the California sun just beginning to burn as his neighbors watched. He watched as they put his art, his furniture, his life into trucks. He watched Candy, now fully dressed and crying hysterically, get put into a taxi. He was a king. Now he was a spectacle. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a sterile $20 an hour rental office with peeling paint and the smell of stale coffee. The 48 hours in between had been a blur of concrete and fluorescent lights, a holding cell that smelled of bleach and despair, the one phone call. The humiliation of discovering every one of his credit cards was declined. His friends were no longer taking his calls. Roger Harding had officially recused himself, citing a fundamental conflict of interest. He'd only made bail by signing the title of his Patek Philippe watch, the one Candy had given him for his birthday, over to a bail bondsman who looked at him with pity. His new criminal lawyer, a man named Glass, who charged $2,000 an hour and looked like he hadn't won a case since the 90s had just left. The news was bad. It was apocalyptically bad. "The case they have," Glass had said, rubbing his tired eyes. "It's not a case, Marcus. It's a confession. They have everything. Server logs, encrypted emails, the wire transfer codes from Icarus to Lyra, and the final hop to the Caymans. Whoever this whistleblower is, they didn't just give the feds smoke. They gave them the charred smoking building, the blueprints, and the receipt for the gasoline. And," Glass had added, "they threw in a motive. They have correspondence detailing your intent to divert funds for a new life with a Ms. C. Alvarez. It paints a very clear picture for the jury, and it's not a good one." Now Marcus was alone. His phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a financial journal he was still subscribed to. He almost ignored it. He clicked. "For immediate release, Vandermeer Collection partners with Metropolitan Museum of Art for new exhibit." He scoffed. Old money, old news. He was about to delete it when he saw the subheadline. "The ambitious new exhibit, The Hidden Hand Masterpieces of Provenance, will be guest curated by noted art historian Elena Hayes. The exhibition and a new acquisitions fund are being sponsored by a $100 million grant from the Blackwood Foundation." The phone almost slipped from his numb fingers. There was a photo. It was Elena. But it wasn't his Elena. It wasn't the defeated wife in the drab gray suit looking at the floor. It wasn't the mousy, bookish girl he'd married. This was a different woman. A new woman. She was standing on the iconic steps of the Met, flanked on one side by Beatrix Vandermeer and on the other by Julian Alistair Blackwood. She was wearing a sharp dark blue Armani suit that probably cost more than his lawyer. Her hair was cut in a sleek professional bob. Her eyes, looking directly into the camera, were not stormy. They were clear, cold, and utterly in command. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed into him like an avalanche. Guest curated by noted art historian. His little hobby. Beatrix Vandermeer. The connection she made. The deal she charmed. The Blackwood Foundation. The man on the yacht. The cold, thin smile. Blackwood wasn't her lover. He was her patron, her sponsor. He was the Renaissance prince, and she was his master artisan of revenge. He finally understood. The divorce, the fight over the house, her pathetic begging. It was all theater. A grand, spectacular performance to establish her as a victim, not a co-conspirator. She wasn't trying to win the divorce. She was just running out the clock until the real war began. She had used her weakness, her little hobby, her knowledge of art and provenance, her quiet, meticulous mind, and she had systematically and surgically dismantled his entire life. She hadn't just left him. She had erased him. Blackwood hadn't saved a damsel in distress. He had funded an avenging angel. Marcus Thorne looked at his reflection in the dark, silent screen of his phone. The smirk he'd worn just 48 hours ago seemed like a cruel, distant joke. He had played his game. He had won. He was the victor. But he never realized she and her billionaire mentor were playing a far bigger, far more ruthless game all along. The exhibit's title flashed in his mind, The Hidden Hand. It was her. And in her game, he wasn't just the loser. He wasn't the opposing king. He was the trophy. He was the masterpiece of provenance she had just hung on her wall. In the end, Marcus Thorne learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the person you think you've beaten. He was so busy celebrating his win that he never saw the real defeat coming. Elena didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her life, her career, and her power, all by letting him think he was the winner. The biggest twists in life aren't the ones you see coming. They're the ones that have been planned meticulously in the shadows. What did you think of Elena's long game? Was it brilliant, or was it cold-blooded? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of epic revenge and shocking twists, make sure to hit that like button. It tells the algorithm you have great taste. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that the game isn't over until the real winner is revealed. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel and ring that bell. We have so many more stories like this to tell, and you don't want to miss a single dramatic moment. He was a king of concrete and glass, and she was the wife he discarded like a faulty blueprint. You have no value. He sneered his $10,000 pen, signing the papers that left her with nothing but her name. He thought he had erased her from the ledger of society, a forgotten footnote in his glittering biography. What he didn't know was that in the quiet, shadowed world of forgotten art and reclusive billionaires, a different kind of value exists. He was about to watch the woman he called worthless become the most powerful person in a room he owned, all because of who was holding her hand. This is the story of Emma Vance, and the night her silence finally broke. The room was the color of bone. It was the 74th floor penthouse on Park Avenue, a place Emma Vance had once called home, but it had never been warm. It was a mausoleum of Italian marble, German steel, and cold, unfeeling glass. And seated across a 10-foot slab of polished obsidian that served as a desk was the man who owned it all, Noah William. "Just sign the last page, Emma," he said, not looking up from his phone. He was already scrolling through market reports. The divorce was just another transaction, a merger dissolving. Emma's hand was shaking. It wasn't the loss of the money or the penthouse or the access to a life that choked her. It was the casual indifference. 15 years of her life managing his chaotic homes, raising his public image, curating his collections, and sacrificing her own career as an art historian were being finalized with the same emotional weight as closing a lunch tab. "The settlement," she said, her voice quiet. Noah, it's nothing. My apartment in Brooklyn. That's it." Noah finally looked up. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, were empty of everything but annoyance. He was handsome in the sharp, predatory way of a hawk, a face that graced the cover of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He was Noah William, the real estate titan who built the new New York skyline. "Nothing," he scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "You're getting the apartment. It's paid for. What else did you expect? Half, what did you contribute? Emma, did you lay a single brick? Did you negotiate a single zoning deal? I built an empire. You hosted dinners." "I hosted dinners that secured your first billion-dollar partner." Emma said the words, tasting like ash. "I found the Rauschenberg in that dusty gallery that you later sold for a 2,000% profit. I managed the charities that made you look like a saint." Noah stood up, a towering, bespoke-suited monument to his own success. He walked to the window, looking down on Central Park. "That was your job, Emma. The job of being Mrs. William. You were overhead. a necessary expense that frankly stopped providing a return. He turned. Now I have Chloe. Chloe Sterling. She understands my world. She's an asset. She's on the 30 under 30 list. She has 10 million followers. She adds value. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Chloe Sterling, the tech accessory heiress, all high-gloss polish and ruthless ambition. And what am I? Emma whispered, though she already knew the answer. Noah picked up his $10,000 Mont Blanc pen and tapped it against the divorce papers. You are a 42-year-old woman with a useless master's degree in a dead field. You haven't earned an independent dollar in 15 years. You let yourself go. Your opinions are quaint. Without me, without my name, Emma. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a confidential, cruel whisper. You have no value. You are a zero. Her breath hitched. A zero. The word echoed in the sterile, cavernous room. He had taken her youth, her expertise, her loyalty, and stamped a zero on her forehead. She picked up the pen. Her hand was steady now. The tremor was gone, replaced by an icy cold. She signed her name Emma Vance, not William. The loop of the V was a sharp, defiant victory. You're wrong, Noah, she said, sliding the papers across the obsidian. A zero isn't just nothing. In mathematics, it's a placeholder. It's the difference between 10 and a million. It's the beginning. He laughed. A short barking sound. A placeholder. You're a ghost. In 6 months, no one will even remember your name. She stood, pulling her simple cloth coat around her. You're right about one thing, she said, walking to the private elevator. I'm not Mrs. William, but you seem to have forgotten who Emma Vance was before she met you. And who was that? He called after her, amused. Nobody. The elevator doors whispered shut, reflecting his smirking face back at him. Emma leaned against the cool steel wall, closed her eyes, and let the first and last tear fall. The long descent from the 74th floor had begun. The Brooklyn apartment was small. Not charming New York small, but frustrating hitting your elbows small. It was a 5th-floor walk-up in Greenpoint with steam-clanging radiators and a view of a brick wall. This was the generous settlement Noah had provided a pre-war one-bedroom he'd bought on a whim in 2005 and forgotten he owned. For the first month, Emma was the ghost Noah had called her. She'd unpack her boxes of art history textbooks, their familiar spines the only comfort she had. The severance from her old life was brutal. The friends she had, other wives of other titans, had frozen her out. To them she was a contagion, a reminder that their own gilded positions were conditional. She applied for curatorial positions at the MoMA, the Guggenheim, and the Frick. The responses were polite, automated rejections. She was a woman out of time. She had a 15-year gap on her resume that was filled with private consulting and philanthropic management, the high society euphemisms for being a billionaire's wife. In a world that demanded a hustle, she had been parked in a garage. One rainy Tuesday, steeped in the bitter tea and stale pastry fog of depression, she forced herself out. She wandered aimlessly until she found herself in a dusty, overstuffed thrift shop, the kind that smelled of old paper and mothballs. She was running her fingers along a row of chipped porcelain figurines when she saw it. It was a painting propped up behind a broken floor lamp. It was small, maybe 12·16 inches dark, and caked in a century of grime. The frame was a monstrosity of chipped gold gesso. The tag, written in faded marker, said, $4,500, Old Dutch Lady. Emma stopped. Most people would have seen a murky, depressing portrait of a woman staring at a candle. Emma saw something else. She moved closer, her heart starting a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. The grime was thick, but through it she could see the chiaroscuro, the dramatic play of light and shadow. It was an interior scene. A woman, not just an old lady, but a scholar or an alchemist surrounded by books and globes. But it was the light. The way the candlelight seemed to live on the woman's cheek and cast a warm, translucent glow on her fingers. It was technique. It was mastery. This is impossible, she whispered. The brushwork was too fine. The composition was too sophisticated. It wasn't a copy. It felt alive. It reminded her of the Dutch golden age of the Feenschilders, the fine painters. It was reminiscent of Gerrit Douw, but softer, more intimate. She bought it. She used the last of her weekly cash allowance, her hands shaking for a different reason this time. Back in her apartment, she set up a small easel by her only good window. She didn't have a restoration lab. She had cotton swabs, distilled water, and a patience forged in 15 years of social warfare. For weeks she worked. She slept in 4-hour bursts, existing on coffee and adrenaline. With painstaking millimeter by millimeter care, the grime of ages receded. And a face emerged. The woman in the painting wasn't just a scholar, she was defiant. Her eyes met the viewer's with a startling intelligence. And in the corner, so small it was almost invisible, was a monogram. A simple, elegant JL. Emma's knees went weak. She stumbled back, knocking over her cup of cold coffee. "No," she breathed, scrambling for her textbooks. She ripped open Dutch masters of the 17th century. JL, Judith Leister, a contemporary of Frans Hals, a master in her own right, celebrated in her time, and then almost completely erased from history. For centuries her work was misattributed to Hals or other men. She was a genius who had been dismissed, her value absorbed by the men around her. Emma looked from the textbook to the painting. It was her. It was her style. A lost Leister. A painting of an unknown female intellectual painted by a forgotten female master. A zero, Emma whispered, her hand tracing the JL on the canvas. A placeholder. She wasn't a ghost. She was a detective. She was a curator. She opened her laptop and, ignoring the rejection email from Sotheby's sitting in her inbox, started a new document. Provenance Research, The Alchemist's Daughter. She didn't just have a painting. She had a mission. She had a voice, and she was about to use it. While Emma was discovering a lost world in a layer of grime, Noah William was conquering the current one. His engagement to Chloe Sterling was the event of the season. It wasn't a romance, it was an alliance. The New York Post ran a full-page spread, Titan and Tech Princess to merge. William and Sterling, the new power couple. Their engagement photos taken on Noah's 200-foot yacht were aggressively glamorous. He looked smug. She looked transactional. Noah was also preparing for his crowning achievement, the William Foundation Gala. It was his annual charity spectacle, timed perfectly to coincide with the Met Gala season, ensuring maximum press. This year it was being held at the Met in the Temple of Dendur. The theme was The New Olympians, a subtle nod to himself. He sat in a conference room, his team of 20 fluttering around him. The catering by Jean-Georges, his assistant said. The floral arrangements are costing $200K. The celebrity host is confirmed. And... "What about the auction?" Noah snapped. "The auction is the centerpiece. It's what gets the real donors to open their wallets." "We have the usual," his VP of PR said. "A week on St. Bart's, a custom Patek Philippe, a walk-on role in that new Marvel movie." "Trinkets," Noah spat. "I want something no one else has. I want something that says William is synonymous with priceless. Find me a masterpiece." His team looked terrified. "Noah," the VP said carefully. "A masterpiece like an old master. Sotheby's just sold a Rubens for $40 million. We can't just find one." "Then make one," he roared. "I don't care how. I want this gala to be the night everyone remembers. I want it to eclipse the Met Gala itself." He lowered his voice. "I want a headline that doesn't mention my divorce." His team scattered, scrambling to achieve the impossible. Noah checked his watch. He had a fitting for his Tom Ford suit, then a dinner with a senator. He hadn't thought of Emma Vance in weeks. Across the river, Emma was hitting a different kind of wall. She had a masterpiece, but the art world is a fortress. You can't just walk into Christie's with a painting from a thrift store and claim it's a Leister. She'd sent high-resolution photos to a few prominent art historians and had been met with silence, or worse, dismissive replies. Ms. Vance, while your enthusiasm is admirable, the canon of Leicester is well established. This is most likely a competent 19th century copy. They saw her name, Emma Vance, saw no institutional affiliation, and dismissed her. She was a nobody. She was a zero. She needed an advocate, a name they couldn't ignore. There was one name, a legend in the field of 17th century Dutch art. A man so revered, so notoriously reclusive and academic that his word could move mountains. Dr. Eris William. He was a professor emeritus at Yale, the author of the definitive text on the subject. And in a twist of acidic irony, he was Noah Williams' uncle. Emma had met him only twice. Eris was the black sheep of the William family, the intellectual who had turned his back on the family's brutal real estate business to live a life of the mind. Noah despised him, calling him the dusty old fool who chose books over billions. Emma found his email address through the university archives. She wrote a careful, respectful, and clinically detailed email attaching her photographs and her initial research. She didn't mention Noah, she didn't mention her divorce. She signed it, Emma Vance, Independent Researcher. She expected no reply. It came 3 hours later. It was one line. Call my office, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone the next morning. Dr. William, Ms. Vance. His voice was dry like old parchment. I looked at your photos. I am intrigued. Your analysis of the brushwork on the lace collar is astute. Most amateurs would miss that. You believe it's Leicester. I am certain of it, sir. The monogram, the handling of the light on the globe, the psychological depth of the subject, it's all her. It's a lost piece from her late period after 1640. There was a long silence. Yes, that's what I thought too. Emma almost wept. But, he continued, certainty is not proof. You need X-ray fluorescence. You need pigment analysis. You need to trace the provenance. This costs money, a great deal of money, money I do not have. I know, Emma said, her hope sinking. I thought if you believed me. Belief is for church, Ms. Vance. We are in the business of facts. I know who you are. I know you were married to my nephew. I am sorry for that. He is a barbarian, a modern Visigoth. Yes, Emma managed. He and his ilk, Aris continued. They see art as a stock certificate, an asset. They don't see the soul, this painting. If it is what you say it is, it has a soul. It must be protected from men like him. He sighed. I cannot fund this, but I know one man who can. He is more legend than man, but he respects my opinion. He is the only person on earth I would trust with this. His name is Julian Alistair Blackwell. Emma's blood ran cold. Julian Alistair Blackwell. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was a myth, a tech visionary who had cashed out in his 30s to pursue everything. He owned islands, yes, but he also owned the world's most significant private collection of scientific manuscripts. He funded deep-sea exploration and space elevators. He never gave interviews, was rarely photographed, and was rumored to be a genius with a deep, abiding passion for the lost and forgotten. Mr. Blackwell, Emma stammered. He wouldn't even see me. He will, Eris said, because I am going to call him, and I am going to tell him that a woman my nephew called worthless has found a painting that could rewrite history. That, Eris chuckled dryly, is the kind of story Julian lives for. A week later, Emma was standing in a place that technically didn't exist. It was an unmarked, climate-controlled warehouse in the Bronx known to only a handful of people as the Archive. This was Julian Alistair Blackwell's personal restoration lab, a place with more advanced technology than the Getty and the Rijksmuseum combined. Emma was holding The Alchemist's Daughter in her gloved hands. She had been instructed to come alone. The door hissed open and a man walked in. He was not what she expected. He wasn't old and reclusive. He was perhaps 50, tall with salt and pepper hair, and the arresting intelligent eyes of a man who is perpetually listening. He wore a simple black cashmere sweater and jeans. He looked more like a philosophy professor than a multi-billionaire. "Ms. Vance," he said. His voice was quiet with a faint British accent. "I am Julian Blackwell." He didn't offer to shake her hand, seeing it was occupied with the painting. He simply gestured to a high-tech easel. "Please." Emma placed the painting. Julian circled it, not speaking for a full 5 minutes. Emma felt like a student defending her dissertation to a panel of one. "Eris tells me you found this in a thrift shop," he said, still studying the canvas. "Yes, in Greenpoint. It was the light on the cheek. It called to me." "The light on the cheek." Julian repeated, a small smile touching his lips. "Most people would say the frame or the price." He leaned closer. "And the monogram. J.L." "Judith Leister," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. "Her late period. She was experimenting with more pronounced chiaroscuro, moving away from the brighter palettes of her Halls-influenced work." This subject, a female scholar, is also consistent with her known personal inventory at the time of her death. It's listed as a woman of letters by candlelight. Julian turned to her. His gaze was intense but not unkind. It was appraising. "You're not just a fan, Ms. Vance. You're a scholar." "I was," Emma said. "A long time ago, before I became an accessory." "Nothing is ever a long time ago with art," Julian said. "Or with people. We just get covered in grime." He gestured to his chief restorer, a woman in a lab coat. "Let's put her under the XRF." For the next 8 hours, Emma and Julian watched. They watched as the X-ray fluorescence scanner analyzed the pigment composition layer by layer without touching the canvas. "The lead tin yellow," the restorer murmured, looking at her screen. "It's consistent. The lack of synthetic blues. The composition of the lead white. It's all period correct for the 1640s. Then came the infrared reflectography, penetrating the paint to see the underdrawing. There, clear as day, was the artist's first sketch, a faster, more energetic drawing with changes to the position of the globe. And the signature. Not just the monogram, but a full Judith Leister signature painted over by the artist herself when she added the monogram. Emma covered her mouth, tears welling. It was real. She had done it. "Congratulations, Ms. Vance," Julian said, his voice soft. "You've just rediscovered a masterpiece. She's worth, at a conservative auction estimate, $30 to $40 million. Emma sat down hard. 40 million. Noah's dismissal echoed in her head. A zero. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Now?" Julian said, "We give her a voice. This painting doesn't belong in a private vault. It belongs to the world. It needs to be unveiled. And you are the one who will unveil it. Me, you. We will loan it on its debut to a major museum. It will be the centerpiece of an event. And you, Ms. Vance, will be the one to tell her story. The story of the painting and the story of the artist who was erased." He paused, a calculated look in his eye. "In fact, I know the perfect event. A bit gaudy for my tastes, but it draws the right crowd. And it's one where the press will be particularly interested in a story of hidden value. The William Foundation Gala." Emma's blood turned to ice. "Noah's Gala at the Met." "The very one," Julian said. "I am on the board of the Met and a primary underwriter of the event, much to Mr. Williams' annoyance. He's been begging me for a centerpiece for his auction. I think we've just found it. The museum will host the unveiling, and the auction will be for a naming rights donation. The highest bidder gets their name on the plaque as the patron who brought it to the museum. The money goes to the Met's acquisition fund for female artists. He'll never allow it, Emma said. "Not if it's from me." "He won't know." Julian smiled. "The painting is being loaned by a private European collector. You will be listed as the guest curator and discoverer. He won't see the program until the night of the event. By then he'll be on stage trapped by his own ego." This was terrifying. It was brilliant. It was war fought not with lawyers but with provenance. "But Noah," Emma started, "he'll try to stop me. He'll humiliate me." Julian Alistair Blackwell looked at her, and for the first time she saw the steel beneath the cashmere. "He can try," he said, "but he's a man who values objects. He's about to come up against two people who value history. He doesn't stand a chance." The 2 weeks leading up to the gala were a blur of high-stakes preparation and covert warfare. Noah William was ecstatic. He had his masterpiece. A private European collector, Julian Blackwell's shell company, had agreed to unveil a lost 17th-century painting at his gala. He was insufferable. "A lost masterpiece," he bellowed on a conference call. "It's going to make my gala legendary. The Times is doing an exclusive. Vogue is covering the unveiling." "Noah," his PR head said timidly, "the collector is also insisting that the art historian who discovered and authenticated the piece be the one to present it. Ms. Emma Vance." The name dropped into the room like a bomb. There was a dead, chilling silence on the line. "What?" Noah said, his voice dangerously low. "Did you just say Emma Vance? She's listed as the guest curator." Noah hung up the phone. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He went very, very still. Emma, his Emma, the zero, the ghost. He saw the entire play in an instant. This was a humiliation. She had conspired with someone, that dusty old fool heiress, probably to ambush him at his own event. He buzzed his legal team. "I want an injunction, now. I want you to file a claim that any art discovered by Emma Vance during our marriage is marital property. That painting is mine." His lawyer, a shark named Harrison, paused. "Noah, that's a long shot. She found it after the divorce, and it was in a thrift shop." "I don't care," Noah roared. "Leak it. I want a story in the Post tomorrow. William's ex-wife sued for stealing priceless art. I want her discredited. I want her ruined. I want her portrayed as a vindictive, thieving liar. I want her to be a laughingstock before she even sets foot in that museum." The next day the headline hit: "William's thief ex-wife sued for $40 million over thrift store masterpiece." The story was brutal. It painted Emma as a grifter who, with the help of a sugar daddy billionaire they didn't dare name Blackwell, but the implication was clear, had fabricated a story to extort her ex-husband. Emma woke up to her phone exploding. She read the article and felt the floor drop out. Her small apartment felt like a cage. They were painting her as a whore and a thief. Noah wasn't just trying to win, he was trying to annihilate her. She was about to call Julian and back out to tell him to sell the painting and let her disappear when her doorbell rang. It was a courier. He handed her a large flat velvet box and a simple handwritten note. The box contained a dress. It wasn't a flashy, glittery revenge dress. It was a deep, emerald green velvet gown by a designer she didn't recognize, simple, elegant, and powerful. It was the color of old money and deep forests. The note was on Julian Blackwell's personal stationery. "Emma barbarians always use the crudest weapons. They shout, they lie, they break things. They know no other way. Your weapon is the truth. It is quiet, but it is made of iron. Do not read the news. Do not answer your phone. Put on the dress. I will see you tonight." Tucked into the box was a second smaller box. Inside, on a bed of silk, was a Cartier brooch from the 1920s. It was a phoenix, its wings rendered in platinum and diamonds. Emma closed her eyes. He was right. Noah had drawn his sword, but she was the one holding the masterpiece. She put on the dress. She pinned the phoenix to her shoulder. and for the first time in her life, she felt truly terrifyingly valuable. The Temple of Dender at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was not a room. It was an event horizon. The ancient sandstone temple, a gift from Egypt, was suspended in a vast glass-walled chamber. Tonight, it was lit in hues of deep sapphire and shimmering gold, making the entire structure appear to float on the black mirror-like surface of the reflecting pool. The air thrummed with the sound of 1,000 conversations, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the distant elegant strains of a string quartet. This was Noah Williams' new Olympus, and he was its Zeus. He stood near the entrance, a shark in a flawless Tom Ford tuxedo, his arm possessively around Chloe Sterling. She was a vision in liquid gold, a dress so tight it looked poured on her every angle, designed to catch the light and the camera flashes. They were the center of the room's gravity. "Mr. William? Mr. William?" A reporter from the New York Post, the same paper that had run his hatchet job, shoved a microphone toward him. "Your reaction to the morning's lawsuit, the one claiming your ex-wife is a thief." Noah gave a theatrical, pained sigh, a performance of practiced regret. "It's a sad, sad situation," he said, his voice carrying. Several nearby conversations quieted, tuning in. "I wish Emma well. I truly do. But this is a desperate measure. My foundation." He gestured broadly. "We are about philanthropy, about truth. We cannot be associated with this kind of deception." He was planting the dagger, twisting it in a room full of the most powerful people in New York. He was branding her a liar before she even arrived. "But will the painting still be unveiled?" a Vogue editor asked. "The art is the art," Noah said with a dismissive wave. "The museum is handling it. We are here." He squeezed Chloe's waist to celebrate the children. "Not unfortunate distractions." He smiled, a mask of confident benevolence. He had won. He had defined her. She wouldn't dare show her face. If she did, she'd be a pariah, a sad, vindictive ghost in a room full of glittering gods. And then the room changed. It wasn't a sudden hush. It was a slow, rolling wave of silence that began at the entrance and moved through the crowd like a social tsunami. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The string quartet seemed to falter, the first violinist's bow skittering for a second. Noah turned, annoyed by the shift in attention, his smile freezing. Emma Vance had arrived. She was not the mousy beige woman he had discarded. The woman standing at the archway wore a gown of deep emerald green velvet. It was not a dress that screamed for attention. It was a dress that commanded it. It absorbed the light of the room, suggesting depth and old-world power. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, severe chignon that highlighted the sharp, beautiful bones of her face. Her only adornment was pinned to her shoulder, a 1920s Cartier brooch of a phoenix, its wings rendered in platinum and diamonds, poised for flight. She looked, as one gossip columnist would later write, less like a cast-off and more like a queen who had just won a war. But it wasn't just Emma that had silenced the room. It was the man at her side. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, wearing a simple, exquisitely cut black tuxedo. He was not on magazine covers. He was not on Instagram. He was, in fact, a man who hadn't been willingly photographed at a public event in almost a decade. It was Julian Alistair Blackwell. If Noah William was a king, Julian Blackwell was the man who owned the banks, the governments, and the air itself. He was the ghost of Silicon Valley, the myth of global finance, the collector who outbid museums. His presence here was not a social appearance. It was a statement. The cameras didn't just flash, they exploded. The press, abandoning Noah and Chloe in an instant, surged forward, a wall of shouting. "Mr. Blackwell! Mr. Blackwell! Are you here with Ms. Vance? Julian! What about the lawsuit? Who are you wearing?" Noah Williams' blood ran cold. His wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. He understood. This wasn't heiress. This wasn't some minor league revenge. This was a strategic nuclear strike. He had brought a knife to a war against a man who owned the entire arsenal. Chloe Sterling, a perfect barometer of power, saw it instantly. Her smile faltered. Her hand on Noah's arm suddenly felt less like an embrace and more like a shackle. Her eyes darted from Blackwell to Noah, and in that 1-second appraisal, Noah saw his value plummet. Julian ignored the press. His hand rested lightly professionally on the small of Emma's back. He was a silent shield, his very presence an impenetrable defense. He guided her through the throng which parted for him as if he were a biblical figure. He didn't stop to talk to anyone. He walked her directly to the front row of seats reserved for the museum's primary patrons, a section even Noah didn't sit in. Noah, regaining a fraction of his composure, his face pale with rage, stormed over. He was still the host. This was his room. "Julian," he said, his voice a tight, strangled facsimile of warmth. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were coming." "I'm on the board, Noah," Julian said coolly, his voice quiet but carrying. He was helping Emma to her seat. "And you brought her?" Noah sneered, unable to help himself, gesturing at Emma as if she were a piece of contaminated luggage. "Given the news this morning, that's a bold move. Tainting the gala. The press is having a field day." Before Emma could even flinch, Julian stepped slightly in front of her, a subtle protective maneuver. He turned his full calm attention to Noah. "Tainting," Julian said. "You mean the fictional story your lawyers leaked to the Post at 3 a.m.? A story, I might add, that my legal team, Ms. Vance's new legal team, is classifying as defamation per se." Noah's face went from pale to white. "We filed a countersuit this afternoon for $200 million in damages for defamation and frivolous litigation." Julian continued, his voice as pleasant as if ordering tea. "A copy was served to your security detail at the door tonight. I believe he's holding it for you." Noah was speechless. He was trapped. He was on his own stage under the lights, and he had just been checkmated. "Now, if you'll excuse us," Julian said, "we're here to celebrate a work of art, something you of all people should appreciate the value of." He took his seat beside Emma. Noah was left standing in the aisle, his face a mask of apoplectic, impotent rage. The auction began. It was a blur of the usual trinkets. The St. Bart's Vacation, the custom Patek Philippe. Then the main event. The lights in the great hall dimmed, leaving only the sapphire light on the temple and a single brilliant white spotlight on the stage. "And now," the auctioneer boomed his voice, echoing off the ancient stone, "the moment we've been waiting for, a lost masterpiece, unveiled tonight for the first time in 300 years. The Alchemist's Daughter, by Judith Leister. And to tell us her story, please welcome the brilliant scholar who discovered her, Ms. Emma Vance." There was a spattering of polite, confused applause. Emma stood. Julian gave her arm a small, encouraging squeeze. She walked onto the stage, her emerald dress a beacon in the spotlight. She stood at the podium, her heart hammering against her ribs. The painting was on an easel beside her, shrouded in a black velvet cloth. She looked out. Hundreds of eyes. In the front row, Noah was staring at her with pure, unadulterated hatred. She took a breath, and she began to speak. "Good evening," she said, her voice clear and strong, amplified by the microphone. It didn't tremble. "We are here to meet a ghost, the ghost of a genius." She didn't talk about the thrift store. She didn't talk about her divorce. She talked about Judith Leister. She told the story of a woman who was a master of the Dutch Golden Age, a member of the Painters Guild, a contemporary of Frans Hals. A woman who, after her death, was erased. For centuries, Emma said, her work was stolen. Her signatures were painted over. Her genius was attributed to the men around her. The world decided she had no value. They were told she was a zero. History made her a zero. Her name, her legacy was absorbed by those who had more power. She glanced at Noah. He was rigid. "We are often told," she continued, "that value is determined by the market, by the signature, by what men in boardrooms decide. But value, True value is intrinsic. It is the light on a cheek. It is the truth in an artist's eye. This painting didn't become a masterpiece tonight. It has been one for 3 centuries waiting for someone to look. She walked over and with one smooth, definitive pull removed the cloth. A collective audible gasp went through the room. The painting was magnificent. It was not a grand, sprawling canvas, but an intimate, powerful one. The light from the single painted candle seemed to glow with an inner fire illuminating the defiant, intelligent face of the female scholar. It was a mirror of Emma. The auction for the naming rights began. "We start the bidding at $5 million, the auctioneer cried. A paddle went up. 5 million, 6 million, 8 million. Noah, seeing the room's excitement, saw his final chance. He couldn't let her win. He couldn't let her have this moment. He had to own this. He would buy the naming rights. He would put his name on her discovery. He would possess it, control it, and erase her from her own story one last time. 10 million, he shouted. The room quieted. The bidding slowed. 12 million, a rival developer at the back called out. 14 million, Noah shot back. 15, said the rival. 20 million, Noah roared, standing up. His face was red. He was glaring at Emma, a vein throbbing in his temple. This wasn't an auction. It was an execution. The room was dead silent. The rival developer shook his head and lowered his paddle. $20 million from our host Noah William, the auctioneer said, his eyes wide. A stunning bid. Do I hear 21 going once? Going twice? Noah smiled. A sickly, triumphant smile. He had won. He would crush her with his money. $25 million. The voice was not a roar. It was quiet, calm, and amplified by the microphone at the front table. Julian Alistair Blackwell had raised his paddle almost casually. The room exploded. It wasn't just a bid. It was a judgment. Noah Williams' face crumpled. He looked like he'd been physically struck. He couldn't go to 26 million. He didn't have 26 million in liquid cash. He was leveraged to the hilt, a fact he'd bragged about. He was beaten. He was exposed. He sat down hard. Sold, the auctioneer cried, slamming his gavel. For $25 million to Mr. Julian Alistair Blackwell. The applause was deafening. Emma on stage covered her mouth, tears of sheer, unadulterated relief streaming down her face. As the lights came up, the press swarmed the front table, a chaotic scrum of cameras and microphones. Mr. Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell. Why this painting? Why such an aggressive bid? Noah was frozen, a statue of his own failure. Chloe, in a move of pure, ruthless self-preservation, had already stood up and was animatedly talking to a young hedge funder, her back to Noah. Julian Alistair Blackwell stood. He didn't look at the reporters. He walked past them. He walked past the stage. He walked directly to where Emma was standing, still trembling from the shock and the applause. The cameras followed. The entire gala, all the hundreds of powerful guests, watched. He walked straight up to Emma Vance. He didn't speak. He simply smiled, a warm, genuine smile of profound respect. And in front of everyone, in front of the cameras, the elite of New York and the broken, staring shell of her ex-husband, Julian Alistair Blackwell, reached out and took her hand. He didn't shake it. He didn't kiss it. He just held it. He held it firmly, proudly, and raised it slightly as if they were about to take a bow. A reporter, sensing the real story, shoved a microphone in his face. Mr. Blackwell, a $25 million statement. Julian finally spoke. His voice carried in the sudden hush. He never looked away from Emma. I didn't buy a painting, Julian said. The painting is a gift to the Met, as it should be. I simply made a donation to ensure that the plaque reads, Discovered and curated by Emma Vance. He then turned, still holding her hand, to face Noah. His voice was not angry. It was cold, clear, and final. Value isn't what you can buy, Noah, he said. It's what you can see. And you, he turned his gaze back to Emma, his eyes softening, are the most valuable person in this room. He squeezed her hand. The flashes were so bright they were white. a supernova capturing the single definitive image of the night. Noah William, pale and defeated, a ghost in his own temple. And Emma Vance, the zero, holding the hand of the only man who mattered, her face lit by the glow of a masterpiece. The aftermath of the gala was not a slow fade, it was a detonation. The moment Julian Alistair Blackwell made his $25 million statement, the night was over. Noah William, who had entered as Zeus, was left a ghost at his own feast. He didn't leave. He was deserted. The press, having captured the defining images of his humiliation and Emma's triumph, scrambled for the exits, racing to file their stories. Chloe Sterling, in a move of such ruthless, beautiful precision it would be studied by socialites for years, was seen leaving in a black Maybach, the one belonging to the young hedge funder she had been charming. Her departure was a public execution. Noah was left alone, standing under the gaze of the silent ancient temple, a man out of time. Emma woke the next morning in her small Brooklyn apartment, the sound of steam hissing through the radiator. For a moment she thought it was all a dream, the emerald dress, the blinding lights, the solid, reassuring pressure of Julian's hand. Then she saw her phone. It was a solid, vibrating brick of notifications, and when she opened her laptop, the world had been rewritten. The New York Times style section had cleared its front page. The lead photo was not of the painting. It was a full-color half-page image of the exact moment Julian took her hand. His gaze was on her. Hers was on the audience, a single tear of victory on her cheek. The headline, "The Curator's Eye, How Emma Vance and a Lost Masterpiece Stole the Night." The article eviscerated Noah not with insults but with facts, praising Emma's scholarship and Julian's pointed patronage. The Wall Street Journal was even more brutal. It was a front-page business story: Blackwell snubs William in 25M. Auction. Market correction. The piece was a clinical dissection. It questioned Noah Williams' liquidity, juxtaposing his $20 bid against Blackwell's effortless $25. It then, in a devastating paragraph, mentioned the $200 million defamation countersuit filed by Ms. Vance's new legal team. The subtext was clear: William was a brawler who had picked a fight with a god, and he was dangerously over-leveraged. For Noah William, the dominoes fell with catastrophic speed. First, the social. The new Olympians gala was now a punchline. He was a joke. By noon, 2 of his most prominent board members had formally resigned from his foundation, citing a need to protect our own philanthropic reputations. The invitations to the Hamptons summer circuit, the ones that defined his entire social calendar, silently evaporated. Second, the personal. Chloe Sterling's publicist released a statement at 10 a.m. Ms. Sterling and Mr. William have amicably parted ways. Ms. Sterling is refocusing on her brand and wishes Mr. William the best in his numerous and complex legal battles. It was a masterpiece of polite assassination. Third, and most catastrophic, was the financial. Julian's $200 million lawsuit was a guillotine freezing Noah's credit lines, but it was Chloe who delivered the killing blow. Furious at the public humiliation and the damage to her own brand, she made an anonymous and very detailed call to the SEC. She told them everything he had bragged about in post-merger confidence: the back-channel zoning deal for the new Hudson Yards Tower, the specific dates, the specific alderman. It was a perfect gift-wrapped felony. 2 months later, Noah William was indicted by a federal grand jury. The empire of glass and concrete built on hubris and debt began to crumble. Emma, however, was building. Her relationship with Julian wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was something rarer and more powerful. It was a partnership of the mind. They met in libraries and museums and in the quiet of his archive. He was her patron, her friend, and her greatest advocate. He had insisted she take the full curatorial and finder's commission on the Leicesters' valuation, a sum that made her independently wealthy. But she didn't buy a penthouse on Park Avenue. With that money and a significant seed endowment from Julian's own foundation, she founded the Vance Foundation. Its sole purpose to find, restore, and promote the lost work of female and minority artists, the zeros of history. She leased a restored pre-war warehouse in Brooklyn, not far from the thrift shop where her new life began. It wasn't a sterile office. It was a state-of-the-art conservation lab, a library and a gallery. It was a place of creation, not just acquisition. The final scene takes place 1 year later. Emma is on the main stage at the TED conference in Vancouver. The room is dark, the audience a sea of thousands. She is vibrant, wearing a simple sharp red dress. The only jewelry she wears is the diamond phoenix pinned to her shoulder. "We are taught," she says to the rapt audience, her voice clear and resonant, "to accept the value others place on us. A grade, a salary, a title, or a dismissal." In the front row, Julian Blackwell watches, his arms crossed, a profound, quiet admiration on his face. "I was told by a man of considerable power that I was a zero," she continues. "He meant it as an insult. He meant I was nothing. But he was a barbarian and his math was flawed." A quiet laugh ripples through the room. "A zero is not nothing. It is a beginning. It is the empty space from which all things are created. It is the placeholder that turns 10 into 10 million. The worthless painting by the forgotten artist, the discarded wife. They are not valueless. They are simply waiting. They are the zeros holding the space for the value that is to come." Miles away in a cramped, fluorescent-lit lawyer's office, Noah William watches the same TED Talk streaming on a laptop. He is out on bail, his assets frozen. His Tom Ford suits are gone, replaced by a rumpled dress shirt. The king of concrete is in a concrete box, and the laptop screen is his only window to the world he lost. Emma smiles, the stage lights catching the fire in the diamond phoenix. "Your value is not determined by who claims you," she concludes, her voice ringing with the force of an unshakable truth. "It is determined by what you claim for yourself. Look in the grime, find the masterpiece, and show it to the world." The audience rises to its feet, a thunderous, rolling ovation for the woman who had been a zero and who was now infinitely everything. The story of Emma Vance isn't just about revenge. It's about intrinsic value. It's about the fact that you are worthy, even when someone tries to write you off and stamp a zero on your life. Noah Williams saw value only in what he could own, but Julian Blackwell saw value in what someone knew. What did you think of Noah's spectacular downfall? Was Chloe's twist the ultimate justice, or just self-preservation? If you believe in the power of second chances and the sweet, sweet sound of karma, let me know your favorite part of this story in the comments below. And if you loved this, please don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel for more stories of dramatic revenge and comeback. Who do you want to see get their comeback story next? Let me know.